Well, hi.
Hi.
Ms. Burke.
Hi, Emily.
Thank you so much for meeting with me today and allowing me to interview you on your opinions on the world of education.
You're welcome.
So, I just have a few questions for you today that will hopefully allow me to better understand differentiated instruction and prepare me for what is to come in the future. So, first of all, how long have you taught middle school?
31 years.
What grade and what subject for the most part, do you think?
For the most part, middle school grades, mostly like 6th and 7th grade math and science, mostly. But I've taught all the way from 2nd to 8th grade, and I've taught all subjects.
Wow. Did you like middle school more than elementary?
Yeah, I feel like I'm a middle school person. You know, everybody's kind of a certain type of a person.
Mm-hmm. What are some of the pros and cons of teaching?
Well, I suppose the pros are that if you feel that you have a calling to be a teacher, that's what your heart is telling you, then it's can be a real rewarding field like that, because if you have that need to make a difference in people's lives and to try and just do what you can to help children. So if that's like where your heart is, that's what your calling is, then being a teacher is the most rewarding way to do that. The cons are that it's really difficult because the children are going through a lot. And it gets really hard to keep watching that year after year after year. Like when I first started teaching, like certain things would just make me cry because I felt so sorry for the kids. And then you get to where you've heard it, and you just you need to be there, so you don't let it get to you like that. And then there can kind of come a time where you could almost be like jaded about it because you've heard it so many times that you don't have the same empathy that you used to. And then there can come a time where it's just like your heart's just so heavy from, the suffering from the kids, the things that they have to go through, that, I just can't keep watching that. That's kind of where I've been.
It's weird. I've going in and out. I see that, and it breaks my heart sometimes just to hear what they're going through.
Yeah. There's a lot more pros and cons, but
yeah. Yes, it's good. So moving more on to like differentiated instruction, how would you define differentiated instruction?
Differentiated instruction means trying to find differences in learning styles or in differences in learning needs and where children are in their education, and trying to meet those needs like where they are, at that moment. Mm-hmm. So that's what I think it is.
Okay, yeah. Just from what I've learned in my classroom and everything in my education courses, obviously it's like a very important practice to implement in your classroom. So what do you think really is that importance? Like, what is it really effective doing that? Is it essential to their learning?
Yeah, I really think it is. That's one of the problems that I think that teachers are really suffering with right now, is because there's so much mandated this and mandated that, and you have to be done with this by a certain amount of time, that it's kind of stressful for teachers to really find a way to get through the material and still try to differentiate.
Because not every lesson the state provides meets all the needs, right?
Right. Oh yeah, absolutely. Because nobody knows the needs of your child, your students, more than you do. And so that's one of the things that's so hard about it. It's like, I know my children aren't going to learn this way the best.
Yeah.
And then you've got the pressures of, then somebody's going to pop in and observe you, and if you're not doing it a certain way or whatever. And it kind of like, it takes some of the joy out, because you feel like that you could be doing so much more, but you can't, because you got to
teach to the test almost.
Yeah, exactly. But I think differentiation is like is really important. I mean, clearly, because every child's not the same.
Right, yeah. Nice. Well, in my studies, again, I've learned that when planning for differentiated instruction, it's important to look for student readiness, their interests, and their learning profile to come up with a plan. So how do you plan for differentiated instruction?
I tend to, honestly, because you're busy, you don't have a lot of time for planning and things like that, I kind of tend to find what works best for me in my class, and I kind of tend to just stick to that.
Okay.
And it could be different for every class and every year and things like that. But what were the three things you said?
Readiness, where they're at, their interests, and their learning profile.
Right. So how do I plan? Is that the question? Yeah. I like to use pre-tests, but I don't like them to be real long, and real in depth, because it just kind of, I like to just kind of put my finger on the pulse of where they're at. So you can do that through pre-testing. I don't like pre-made tests. So I like to make my own tests where I can and use those so that I can find out, what the kids are doing, what their needs are. I'm not sure if I'm getting away from the question you asked.
Oh, no, it's okay. Do you give one of those personal quizzes at the beginning of the year that determine kind of what their learning styles are?
No, I've never done that before.
Would that? I've seen some teachers do that. How do you determine their learning styles? Or you just cover all your bases?
Yeah. No, I mean, that's a good question. But first of all, you need to have a learning environment where the kids feel safe at, where they feel encouraged at, because that's your best way to kind of get to know them. And you also need to try and take the time to get to know them too. And I also find that, talking to parents and meeting parents, you kind of learn more about the child that way. And that does kind of help with their learning styles. And honestly, you don't have to be teaching for too long before you can kind of pick up on it, because who likes to draw, who stands up and bounces around all the time and stuff like that. But I would have to say that I haven't personally done a whole lot on actual learning styles, but I do, whenever I'm planning my differentiated instruction, I do try to have different roles and different things that the kids can do, and they have a little bit of choice in that, so hopefully they kind of find what they...
That's a good. Okay. So from my understanding, the items that I may be able to differentiate could include the changing of the content, just manipulating it, I guess, the process and how you teach it, like how you give it, like you were talking about different rules and everything, and then the product that they have to create to show that they have learned what you're teaching. So you talked about how you make roles for them to choose. Like, how do you really implement that differentiated instruction? How do you...
Right. Well, the first thing I do is, of course, I like to use the cooperative learning with differentiation. So there's different roles within the group. And I try to make it so that the roles, certain kids kind of prefer some roles over other ones. So, someone is, kind of the materials handler, and they get up and get things and stuff like that. And somebody is, the group leader or whatever. So there's different things, and I try to make it in different ways. So that, if somebody, especially because I'm an ESL teacher, so if somebody can't read well or somebody who can't write well, then I want to make sure I have some jobs that's not their primary duty. So I try to make the jobs interesting, and I generally let them pick what they want to do. I also take time to create my groups to make sure that I've got kind of mixed groups and that people will mesh well. And within whatever topic that we're doing, science or math or social studies or whatever, I'll kind of let them pick what they're going to do within that topic. And then we have a group, usually have a group project or something that they're working on. And so within that, I try and have different things that they're going to have to do to complete their project. and I try and make sure that those are, some of them are maybe drawing. One of them, maybe part of it is reading and writing facts. Maybe, another part is presenting, another part is, so I try and pull in like those different learning styles like that. And then so give them some choice within the group. Now again, you don't want to have a group where they only like to draw, So so then I let them kind of pick like what they want their role to be, and then also how they want to express that in their project, so that that way they're but they're still under the umbrella of the topic that I gave them.
Right. So is that kind of like what Kagan groups are like?
It's Kagan and cooperative learning, and I mean I've been doing this stuff for 30 years, so to me it's just it's just the way you should be doing the way you should be doing stuff. But I mean I do with differentiation. I do try and cooperative learning, when they first did it years ago, it was kind of like the first coined that word, and it didn't have really a lot of good guidelines and parameters and how to do it and stuff like that. And I like the Kagan too, but I feel like that the Kagan, for me anyway, didn't really incorporate the differences as much. If you've got an ESL student, if you've got a SPED student who can't read, if you've got, so I feel like that you need to have ways to kind of work with those students and help those students along. And then something that I like to do too is to have, as much as possible, to have like student teacher kind of little conferences or whatever, so that I can look at, and not necessarily with the group, but maybe with the group work, but just maybe on the side, so that I can talk to them. Like maybe if everybody's doing their own individual writing or whatever, try and work with them one-on-one. That way you can address the deficiencies that they have at that time or whatever, and then you go on to the next student. So that's real time intensive, but I mean that's one way to really help, is to have student-teacher conferences.
Yeah. Okay. Are there any like specific examples where you've used it on a certain project where it's worked really well?
I've done some things before with the iPad. There's a lot of interesting different apps, and you can actually like make presentations on the apps.
That's so cool.
Yeah, there's one called Telegami. I don't know if you've heard of that before. And so they can actually type in what they want the little avatar to say, or they can read it themselves and the avatar speaks for them, which is a nice way to do it for the kids are afraid of presenting or whatever. Oh. And so that there's a lot of fun apps.
I would have had that. Is it like, does school provide iPads? Different schools? I haven't seen that yet. So.
Yeah. One of the problems with them, though, is it's really hard to get your apps loaded on them that you want. So, be friends with the tech person. But something that I do, honestly, that I think that is like just the quickest, easiest way to do it, in my opinion, is, well, first of all, the first thing I do is we just practice roles. Make sure everybody knows the different roles. We practice getting into the groups and out of the groups. We make sure that they know how to do that. I make sure that they know how to get up and find the materials and sit back down, so that they know how to do all that. How are they going to throw away paper? How are they going to ask questions? All that. But so once we've practiced that, then it becomes a lot easier to do the groups. But really the easiest thing to do, and you can just do it at any time, in my opinion, is just have the kids make a poster. So like I like the big sticky poster note, the big sticky ones, Post-it notes, the big ones. They're kind of expensive, but they're worth it. Or you can cut them. You can even cut them in half or whatever. And so it becomes a real easy, efficient way without a lot of prep, that you can just pull this out and be, and if they're used to how they function in the groups and all, you can basically almost give them just about any topic. And whatever ways you want them to put their poster, whether you're going to have a definition, an example, a picture, whatever parts you want to have to it, then the kids can make it and just stick it on the walls and then present it. And so it becomes a real easy, real efficient way to do something that, without a lot of prep and without a lot of materials, and you can get it done in a class period when the kids understand your routine.
All right, wow, that's a good idea. I like that. So would you say, I think you answered this already, would you say that the extra planning that goes into differentiated instruction, is it worth it in the end based off the results?
I mean, it definitely is, but the problem is that teachers have almost so much time taken up, their planning time taken up, that it doesn't leave hardly any time to plan for extra things. But I mean, it's definitely worth it because the kids will enjoy it. It's more, it's an easier way for you to interact with the kids and interact with the groups in kind of a positive way and everything like that. And like I said, once you kind of know the kids, once the kids know you, once they know how they're supposed to operate in the class, then to me it just becomes easier. But I mean, as far as like differentiating goes, you still need to assess where they are. So whether or not that's some sort of an exit slip or whatever. But when I consider differentiation, I don't consider like just where they are on my topic. So if I'm doing math, then if I'm differentiating, then I'm also concerned about how are they reading, how are they writing, how are they getting along with others, how's their vocabulary, so you kind of want to include kind of all those different needs. It's not just, who can add and who can't, you know what I mean? Because the kids are going to learn better if they feel comfortable in your room, if they have a working relationship with you. And to me, all of those things are part of differentiation because, the better you know your kids, then the better you're going to be able to give them a learning experience that they need. And it also helps because you don't want kids like making fun of the ones who don't get it or making fun of the ones who can't read or whatever. So you're going to really set the tone because then that way, if instead of making fun of the child who can't read, they want to help the child who can't read, then that's what you want to. But to me, I tend to be a teacher who's kind of a nurturer anyway. So to me, when I think of differentiation, like I said, I'm not just thinking about like who can multiply and who can't. I'm like thinking of the whole child. What are the needs of this child? Because if you're not filling the certain other needs, then you're not going to be able to successfully teach them anything. So
that's really good advice. Making sure they're not stuck with somebody that they hate or.
Yeah, exactly.
Because that could just take them all the way off course.
Yeah. One time you might want to, I don't know if you want to cut this or not, but one time I had several kids who just, they wouldn't cooperate in any group, no matter where they were. And I kept trying different things and put them different ways. And they just kept irritating everybody that they were in a group with. So finally I said, I'm putting them all in one group. And I put them all in one group. But they finally realized, they're like, oh, I can't be in this group. He gets on my nerves. You get on my nerves too. And then it was funny because, it was really like about 5 minutes before they were kind of like, that's why I'm in this group, isn't it? So it was kind of funny.
That's great.
Yeah. And I really do think it did help. They kind of got the message without me having to tell them.
That's great. I'll keep that in mind. I'll probably use that one day.
Sometimes you get desperate enough, you'll try anything.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Oh my gosh. As we come to a close, are there any final parting words or advice that you might have for me as I approach my first year of teaching? Anything. What would you have told your younger self? If you could go back.
Okay. I think that building relationships with your students is probably the number one most important thing you can do, because it's going to help with discipline. It's going to help interface with the parents. Because a lot of times a child will go home and say, oh, Miss So-and-so, she just doesn't like me. And then when you talk to the parent, that's what they're getting. Oh, you hate my child, So I think that, for me, for the type of person I am, I think that it's really important to establish relationships with the children. I mean, there's so much. And I think that just like trust your instincts. It can be really overwhelming. Like, oh, I got to do this. Oh, I got to do that. Or, oh, we have to do Kagan now. Or, oh, we have to do, whatever it is. And so I think that you really have to trust your instincts because, if you have the heart of a teacher, then you're just going to kind of instinctively know what to do. Not everybody, I don't think everybody has that. But sometimes I go to some of these workshops like the Kagan or whatever, and I'm like, I've been doing half of that stuff on my own. I didn't name it or write about it and put it in a book. I wish I had, and so you will kind of develop you'll develop your techniques and things like that as you go. And so.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for imparting your wisdom.
You're welcome.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.